So good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining the official launch of Pro Bono Week 2023, which amazingly is our 22nd annual Pro Bono Week here in the UK, generously hosted by Herbert Smith Freehills. It's a real focal point, Pro Bono Week, across the year. It brings us together as a sector. It helps us appreciate the lawyers who volunteer. It also helps us discuss the challenges of Pro Bono too. Before I get started, can I thank our organising committee and our comms group that work across the year to organise UK Pro Bono Week for everyone. It's a real group team effort. Pro Bono Week is owned by everyone in the pro bono sector. But can I thank not just the organising committee, but particular Pro Bono Week team members, Mary Dobson-Smith, Laura Cassidy and Laura Potter, for all the work they've done across the year. And thanks too for the National Pro Bono Centre for their work and FTI on comms. So those are quick thanks to our brilliant Pro Bono Week team. A couple of practical matters before we get started. If you like social media, and I guess not everyone does, we do have some hashtags on the wall behind me. Do use them if you'd like. We'd love to hear your contributions on social media. Also, we have a Slido facility for feedback, which I'll come back to later in the night. And so with those quick preliminary matters, and I'm going to introduce our panel in due course, I'm delighted that we start tonight, as is traditional, with the Attorney General, the Right Hon Victoria Prentice KC, who's going to officially launch Pro Bono Week. You probably know her, but she was originally a barrister, and we know, she might mention it, that Pro Bono was part of her early career before she became an MP. So please do welcome the Attorney General now to start Pro Bono Week.
So thanks, Toby, very much, and thank you as well to Herbert Smith Freehills for this amazing venue. It's lovely to be with you. And thanks as well to the Pro Bono Committee for organising another, it looks to be really great week celebrating Pro Bono. I am really sorry that I can't stay tonight. I am, well, I'll be perfectly frank with you, I'm due in Downing Street at 7 o'clock, and I think it's really important that there is a lawyer in the room when the Cabinet meets. I really do. And I'm quite particular about that. I'm not a member of Cabinet, but I do attend Cabinet, and I bloomin' attend Cabinet every time. And just as I think, in fact, this is relevant to what we're going to be talking about tonight, I think it's important that there is a lawyer in every room where there needs to be a lawyer. So that is really, I suppose, the message that we're trying to get across. I think it's good that the government has a lawyer in the room, and I think it's good that the government wants to have a lawyer in the room. So when I'm asked to go, I jolly well go. So I'm sorry I can't stay. I really am, as I'd love to talk to you all, and I'd love to get your individual stories and experiences of doing pro bono work. As Toby said, I also did quite a lot of pro bono work, and I think I still do sometimes, as part of my day job. I think I still am a barrister. I certainly identify as a barrister. Certainly I identify as a lawyer before being a politician, actually. And though I had a slightly unusual career that was only a few years at the self-employed bar, I was then employed by what was then called the Treasury Solicitors Department for the vast majority of my career for 17 years. And that, I feel very fortunate that that public sector experience is now very useful to me, because it gave me a grounding in admin law, which really is most of what I do at the moment. There were elements that you couldn't do as a public sector lawyer, though, and there were elements that I was always very grateful to do around the edges of my career as a volunteer, mainly for charities and not always in the litigation space in which I worked in my day job. I remember helping charities set themselves up, helping them with their governance, helping them with appeals in the case of schools, helping them with, in some cases, planning matters in which I was not expert. But, you know, we muddled through, and it certainly broadened my horizons and made me, I think, a better lawyer. In fact, I'm sure it did. So thank you genuinely for your commitment to pro bono work. Pro bono is absolutely, in my view, part of our professional responsibilities. It supports access to justice. It makes sure that everybody can get a fair chance in the justice system. It doesn't just benefit the client, though, and I think we should be honest about that. It enables us as our professionals to give back to our communities, which frankly is something that I think many, many lawyers feel a need and a wish and a desire to do. I think we want to be lawyers because we believe in justice and we think that justice matters and we want to make sure that it is available to everybody. We can use our wider skills and knowledge to contribute, not just formally what we might consider to be our legal skills, but the way we can apply them in ways that do benefit other people in our communities. And it really, really enables us to widen our experiences from what are often increasingly narrow practices and to pick up other experiences and other forms of work and appear before tribunals which we would never otherwise dream of. So it's clearly, and I'm sure this will be said by every speaker, that it's there to complement but not to replace legal aid, which remains an integral part of our system. People here will have different views as to how sufficient that system is, but pro bono will always, I think, be an important complementary element and is part of our professional work. But thank you for what you do. I know it's around the edges. I know it doesn't come easily. I know that we're all busy, and I know that there are pressures on many of us. So we should celebrate it and thank ourselves for doing it, while recognising that it is an important part of what we do. So I'd like to just close by looking forward to celebrating, all of us this week, celebrating the importance of lawyers, in society, and that's always a good thing. And celebrating the fact that as professionals, we want to give something extra and we want to give something back.
Thank you very much, Attorney General, and I hope you'll mention to the Prime Minister that it's Pro Bono Week this week.
That's a deal.
So I'm very pleased now to introduce the next part of the evening. We have an amazing panel of lawyers, both barristers and solicitors, who's going to offer us a wide range of examples, expiring examples of pro bono. And let me introduce them in the order in which you're going to hear from them. And each of these speakers is going to tell us more about the pro bono project they volunteered with and how that project has helped transform lives. And let's start now with my far right, which is Maya Williams. Maya is an employed barrister working at Lakeland Watkins and is a trustee of Appeal. We're lucky also to have a video from Andy Mallickson that Maya and others helped pro bono, which will come shortly. To my immediate right is Katie Cotton. Katie is a partner at Oric, who's volunteered as an associate in the Voices for Families pro bono project. To my left is Anahita Maradi. She is a barrister at One Pump Court and was the Young Pro Bono Barrister of the Year at last year's Pro Bono Awards arranged by Advocate. And then in the middle to my left is Karen Hees. She is a legal director at Field Fisher and the leader of Rachel's Voice, which is a pro bono partnership with MenCap. And then finally to my far left is Laura Hine, who is an associate at Reed Smith, who's volunteered with Maternity Action Pro Bono Email Advice Service. So a fantastic array of speakers tonight. And I think first of all then, we're going to hand over to Maya, who's going to introduce the video we're going to see from Andy. Thank you.
Evening everybody, thank you very much for coming along to listen this evening. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about Andy's case. You may have seen some coverage about it in the summer, but Andy was exonerated in July this year, having served 17 plus years for crimes that he did not commit. And through various means, we are able to show now that not only did he not commit it, but another individual has been arrested and there is a charging decision pending. Whilst he was exonerated in 2023, the crime took place in 2003 and Andy was convicted in February the following year. He then was imprisoned for life. He was ordered to serve a minimum of 7 years because of his refusal to accept his guilt and because of his refusal to attend certain programs within the prison related to that. He served 17 years, was released in December 2020, which you can imagine is not the most fun time to be released from prison. And then we were able to secure his exoneration this summer. I'm going to hand over and you can hear a little bit more from Andy, and then I'll tell you about the role that Pro Bono played in securing his exoneration.
I was convicted of 2 rapes and the strangulation charge. I was completely innocent.
Is it hard to even say out loud?
Yeah, it sticks in my throat. It's really hard. It's alien. I was given a life sentence, and I ended up serving 17 and a half years almost, yeah. And time just dragged like treacle. It's just like unbelievable. You know, the first few weeks, months, you just don't think you're going to make it, because what if years stretched before me, as it turned out they did. Yeah, it just drags and drags and drags and drags. It's psychological torture. I had serious help only when appeal came on to the scene in 2017. And they really started to look into it. I felt a rush of relief at first. I thought, you know, these are the people I've been looking for all this time. You know, hoping that there is somewhere an organisation that is capable of doing this. Appeal have been absolutely instrumental in uncovering all this malfeasance and downright corruption. It wouldn't have been possible at all. It wouldn't have been possible at all with a high street lawyer firm, because they just don't have the resources. Appeal have been amazing. Yeah, it's a singular, very exceptional outfit. It's a charity and a legal firm. And they have a very small staff, but they punch above their weight. If Appeal weren't there, I would be really struggling. I mean, I'd be really struggling, you know, because, you know, my life's not my own, really. The trouble with reintegrating into society, it seems like it's probably straightforward to people, but it isn't, because you've lost all your agency. You've been locked in a box for most of that time, and you've been treated like the worst of the worst by prison officers and the system itself. So they know, and that's a tremendous help. Without them, who knows? I don't know. I mean, maybe I'd be in the gutter, or I don't know. Who knows? Maybe I'd be even dead. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. But for sure, life is much easier to deal with that kind of support that they offer. You know, there should be more of that. There should be more of that. Yeah.
So you heard Andy there talk about Appeal punching above its weight, and the simple reality is the only reason that is possible is because of pro bono support. Appeal obviously get a lot of charitable funding, and they secure legal aid where it's available, and as you can imagine, it's fairly limited in terms of its availability post-conviction. So they're reliant on firms for all sorts of pro bono support, exactly the sort of things you would imagine around drafting applications for the CCRC, drafting pleadings, research, all of that sort of stuff. Some completely mad tasks like rewatching episodes of the Jeremy Kyle show to try and find a particular witness, which we did. And it was a very surreal moment to hear that quoted in the Court of Appeal, but it happened. We've also had strange requests like asking prison officers to take photographs of Andy's tattoos, because that was part of one of our CCRC applications. The reason I raise those slightly bizarre examples is because I think one of the great problems when it comes to pro bono is people thinking they need to stay in their lane and understanding what their skill set is and sticking to it. That is not how it works. People need all sorts of different skills in order to help them with the legal problems that they have. And just because you have an expertise and just because you have a huge amount of knowledge about something doesn't mean that you don't have an exceptionally broad skill set that is incredibly useful. We spend our days with people that are good at the same things that we are, and I think after a while we forget that we're good at them. And in Andy's case, we had to be good at all sorts of things very quickly, some of which we had never done before. One of the big parts of Andy's case was getting the case to a point where we could then apply for legal aid. It's not as easy as just saying, oh, the DNA has improved, we'd really like to get it tested, and the state saying, great, that's great, can you just send us the details? It takes, in Andy's case, 4.5 years of plugging away at finding out what evidence exists, seeing what still exists, and then trying to get it retested, compared against the database and all of the reports that you may have seen about Andy's case in particular. So when you're thinking about pro bono and how it works with legal aid and how it works with a charity, it can be a little bit overwhelming. But Andy's case is just about people that started helping him often years ago and stuck with it. You can see, I hope, from the video and from the footage you might have seen of him over the summer, or the side of my face you might have seen on the 10 o'clock news, that Andy as an individual instills a huge amount of goodwill from people, because he has more generosity of spirit and patience after 17 years in prison than most of us would in a traffic jam or when we're mildly annoyed at work. And that is what keeps people helping. And when we talk about transforming the lives of individuals, I know it sounds obnoxiously cute to say it, but he transformed our lives just as we transformed his. In addition to transforming Andy's life and that of his family, appeals work has already changed the way compensation will work for all of the people that come behind Andy. When the state wants to do something, it does, and within 2 weeks that change had already been realised. There will be inquiries into Andy's case, and that will improve how the system will move for everyone that follows him. So whilst it can sometimes seem like you put hours, and in Andy's case it would be no exaggeration, because we've worked it out, to say thousands of pro bono hours over 7 years from multiple firms and chambers. That's the level of dedication that it took to transform his life. But hopefully that investment in an organisation like Appeal that were then able to help Andy, that's going to pave the way for it to be easier for everybody that comes after him who really is in need of having their conviction overturned.
Thank you, Mara, very much. That video was really powerful, and I think we should thank the production team for putting that together, especially for tonight. It really helped then Mara to explain the impact of multiple law firms and chambers working together on a pro bono basis, then to get legal aid alongside Appeal, the whole time providing that support as a charity. It's a really inspiring example, so thank you very much, Mara. So we now move to Katie. The floor is yours.
Yep. So yeah, I'm Katie Cotton. I'm an M&A partner at Oric, and I've been a volunteer for the Voices for Families project for about 5 years now. The Voices for Families project is a collaboration between LawWorks and the charity Together for Short Lives. And Together for Short Lives is a charity which supports children with life-threatening and life-limiting conditions and their families. And the project is to provide legal advice to those families to support them with mainly housing and social care, but I'll come on to, but it does sort of tend to creep into other areas as well. I've worked on around 12 projects during the last 5 years, and they're really, really varied, and they can become, you know, they start off as one thing, but they often become quite complicated and cover a lot of different areas. And, you know, as Maya said, they're things that I won't have done before. You know, I'd never done housing law, I'd never done community care law, I hadn't done kind of anything to do with the NHS, and it's all things that, you know, you can get to grips with quite quickly because you know where to look and you know what the skills are to sort of find out what the right answer is. And in this project, we also have support from Jess, who's the caseworker, so she can really help point you in the right direction. But she obviously can't run all these cases, so you can kind of go to her and say, you know, this is what the problem is, and she'll give you some ideas, she'll tell you which cases to look at, and then you can be pushed off in the right direction, and sort of work with your team to sort of get to the answer that you need to. Lots of the cases are really, really varied, like I said. I mean, the first case I did was very sadly looking after a couple whose disabled daughter had died, and they were left in housing that had been adapted for her, and they could no longer afford to keep that housing because they were no longer getting the benefits that they were getting while she was alive, and they need to be rehoused, and that the council just weren't really listening to them. And the mother particularly was extremely depressed, and, you know, was having a lot of financial issues, not being able to pay for the housing, and we were able to support them in getting rehoused in a one-bedroom bungalow that they could then afford. I'm working currently on a project for a family that have got twin daughters, one of whom is very severely disabled, the other's able-bodied, and we're trying to sort out their housing, which has been completely messed up a house was supposed to have been adapted to be suitable for their daughter, and it turns out that it's been completely messed up and it's not actually suitable. And we're now having to go through, try and get planning for this house. So I've now started learning about planning law, which is not something I knew about before. So we're trying to get planning permission to sort out this house for them. Dealing with a family that need medical supplies for their disabled son because they're not getting enough sort of various different consumable supplies for him. That led to helping them with some support in terms of the community care that they needed, because the care package wasn't sufficient to cover them when the mother needed to go off to Pakistan to visit her elderly parents. I've dealt with a couple of families where the care package has just been sort of reduced for no apparent reason, and we've supported them in getting that reinstated. And another one was a family where the mother had been threatened with prosecution because her disabled son hadn't been able to attend school, and rather than supporting her with that, they threatened to prosecute her for not sending him to school. So we managed to get through that and then sort of put her on the path to getting a sort of education healthcare plan for him, to sort of make sure he was looked after going forward in school. So it's really, really varied and often leads off in a different pathway. I mean, you have to accept sometimes that you can't make everything better. These families are going to be in a really difficult situation. The children are still going to be in a life-threatening or life-limiting condition when you've finished, but you can help make things better. And I had one case where sadly the child died while we were working on the project, which was really upsetting. But you can make a really significant difference to people's lives doing this. You sort of help navigate the sort of legal journey for them, and you don't realise what the skills that you've got. You don't realise that you've got them until you start helping with these things. Often people feel really alone in the situation where they've got a sort of severely disabled child, and suddenly realising they've got someone sort of to be on their side to support them, and that you can be the lawyer in the room because there is nobody there to support them, and they just don't really know how to address things. Some families can become really adept at working their way through because they've had to learn it, but others just are completely at a loss and they just feel like they're facing a brick wall. So you can really just sort of showing them where to look and writing the letters and sort of navigating through and making sure that the authorities know that you're going to see these complaints processes through, and that it's not going to, they're not going to be able to just get away with just stopping, can be really helpful. In terms of sort of, I obviously haven't got a video, but in terms of bringing the sort of voice of the family, I guess, into the room, it's a case that two of my partners worked on, which was a case of an 11-year-old girl who we called G, who has cerebral palsy. She was on a ventilator, and she needed to be sort of watched all the time. And the local authority provided a specialist nurse 5 nights a week, but her mother was expected to sort of sit up and watch her the other 2 nights a week, which was really causing her mother to struggle because she was working, and it was affecting her siblings' well-being. So the family had asked the local authority to have care 7 nights a week, and they turned that down, and our team was able to pull together evidence to submit to the local authority to show that they were working on outdated information. They provided expert opinion to show how severe G's needs were, and we actually managed to get the decision reversed within about a few months, which for this kind of project, I mean, they are quite long projects. This was a really quick decision. And yeah, the family quoted, they said, "We are so grateful. I've been asking for years for G's hours to be increased, and I've been given every excuse under the sun. Her condition is deteriorating. The 7 days is what she needs. Not having the full care impacted on the whole family. We just can't thank you enough. The team were amazing. Health was not their specialism, so they spent time ensuring they understood our situation and went over and above the norm. They took time to understand. They were friendly, nice people who cared about us. We were so lucky to have their help. Without your support, we would never have got this outcome. This truly means so much to our whole family and will make an amazing difference. Thank you for being there for us. I'm forever indebted to you all." I think that just shows sort of how you can change people's lives doing this kind of project.
Thank you very much, Katie, and thank you to the family of G for sharing that message with us this evening. I really felt the importance in that of how you as a law firm could work alongside a national children's charity at the same time as having the support from LawWorks to provide that lawyer in the room to help a really disadvantaged family navigate those issues for their child. So thank you very much for that. We now move on to Anahita.
I speak from the perspective of a self-employed barrister, not as someone that has a regular salary. My view is every case with merits should be funded. Pro bono work as a self-employed practitioner is hard, especially cases that engage issues about our fundamental human rights. These are cases that put a lot of pressure on the lawyer, that carry a lot of responsibility, and as we said earlier, require a lot more than just your legal skills. They require emotional resilience and so on and so forth. But we are where we are, and without pro bono work, some of the most vulnerable people in society would be alone fending for themselves against the mighty state. And so I love the work that I do. Even if it means dipping into my taxes, I will keep doing it. To demonstrate how important pro bono is, I do a lot of pro bono work representing bereaved families in inquests, individuals in immigration detention who've got no idea when they'll be released. But I want to talk about a case that spans across the UK's borders and into Iran to give you a perspective on how varied pro bono work can be. In 2017, a British man went to Iran, travelling to see his elderly mother after she had an operation. This was at a time when the UK and Iran didn't have great relations. I mean, they don't anyway, but this was particularly a volatile time. And so my client became a pawn. He was arrested, he was detained, he was charged on a trumped-up charge of spying. He had to undergo a sham trial that was devoid of any due process. He was convicted, he was sentenced to 10 years. His family back home in the UK were at a loss. They had no idea who to go to, and this was not a case that could be resolved with a couple of hours of advice or going to a court in the UK. This was about diplomacy, politics, law, and campaigning. And that case took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, a lot of sleepless nights. I have to say, by the way, I was led by Nigel Edwards KC at another chambers and Ide Dijkstal at another chambers. And we spent so much time over a year doing legal research, drafting documents, attending meetings, and that's probably as far as I can go in terms of the work we did. But on the 16th of March of 2022, he got on a plane home, having served less than half of his sentence. And that made it all worth it. I actually stayed up and watched Sky News, and I was bawling in tears as I watched, and it made it all worth it. But I think a quote from him, my client, probably will express how important pro bono work is. And this, I think, applies to my immigration detention clients, to my inquest clients as well, not just this case that was in the news. Were it not for the efforts of the legal team, I would surely still be rotting in Evin prison without any prospect of seeing my loved ones ever again. I will forever be grateful for their perseverance and dedication. And that speaks, I think, to all of the lawyers that do pro bono work. The benefits are genuinely immeasurable.
Thanks, Anahita. I think the key message that stood out for me there was people would be at a loss without a lawyer to help them defend themselves, and we need more of that. So thank you also for your client for sharing that message to us for tonight. So move on now to Karen, please.
So I'm by profession, I'm a clinical negligence lawyer, and I work with a large team, and a lot of our clients have brain injuries and a learning disability. And in the course of that work, have done some work with MenCap. We decided that we could use those skills, So thinking about what Mayor said about how we can take specialist skill sets and go outside of our normal path and say, how can we use them differently? And we thought, well, we can use this and tackle health inequality, because it's a real problem for people with learning disability. There is a national leader report that comes out every year, which is looking at learning from deaths of people with learning disability. And you can expect to die far, far sooner if you have a learning disability than your able-bodied, non-intellectually impaired fellow. You are far more likely to die of an avoidable death in hospital. And so what we particularly wanted to look at was reducing avoidable deaths of people with a learning disability in acute healthcare settings, so not in care homes, but the acute hospital settings, which is where the skill sets lay. So we set up Rachel's Voice. It came out of a case that I ran for MENCAP and for Di Johnson, the mother of a lady called Rachel. Rachel had gone into hospital. She lived in a care home setting, and she'd gone into hospital to have some teeth extracted. And when she'd been discharged back to her care home, the discharge information was wholly inadequate for someone with a learning disability who was also almost totally non-verbal. It was geared for someone who would know how to care for themselves, and her care home therefore didn't manage the fact that she was bleeding into her mouth overnight, was positioned flat, so she was aspirating the blood, and basically she was not managed properly at all. The coroner found that she died of gross failings to deliver basic medical care. Now, the coroner, before we got involved, had decided there wasn't going to be an inquest because he said the family weren't concerned. The family, Di is illiterate. Di came from a traveller family. Di didn't think you should complain. She was very upset. She had complained at the time, but she said no one wanted to listen to her. MENCAP had reached out to her and said, can we help, can we support? And so she landed up with me. And we had three what we call pre-inquest reviews with the coroner, fighting to get different documents included, to get new interested parties involved, because what the 111 service was involved, there were failings there. The care home, pooling care, and we also needed to get the coroner to instruct an independent expert. And we got all of that. We got that partly because I had the most extraordinarily brilliant barrister who gave her time to do a 2-week inquest for free. So it was the beginning. It was the beginning of our project, which we set up. And from that, we set up Rachel's Voice. So what we do is we work to, as I say, reduce avoidable deaths of people with a learning disability in healthcare settings. We do it not just through inquests, we do it by supporting people who have lost their loved one, and we help them with the hospital investigation. So we sit there and we push for in-depth in hospital investigations. We've just had a success in getting a coroner who said they weren't going to hold an inquest, closed it all down 2 years ago. It's just been reopened. We've just got the date. It's opening tomorrow. And I'm very, very happy about it. And I've got my counsel lined up, and we're going back, and it will be fully heard. We also use it for campaigning, so we use it from an impact position. We don't have the capacity, we made this decision, we don't have the capacity right now to offer advice to everyone and do blanket inquest advice. So we choose the cases that fit core problems that we see for people with learning disability again and again. For instance, aspiration pneumonia. So we're doing an inquest which is looking at aspiration, a gentleman who died of choking, but probably through silent aspiration, because he had dysphasia and his eating has not been managed properly. We We also are now on a working party looking at death certification, because too often death certificates say people die because they have a learning disability, which is a little like saying you died because you have brown hair, you know, your innate characteristic. So we find that not acceptable, but also it means that you're not being forced to investigate as a hospital trust the reason for the death. You're being able to just accept someone's death as being due to their characteristics. And we're saying, no, look behind, think further. So we've got a website, and we're building that, and we're building information. Again, we're trying to involve lots of different people with different skill sets, because it's not just lawyers who work on the cases, it's also people in the team who help with doing information leaflets, helping build the website. Emily Shomat, who's now working with National Pro Bono Centre, helped me set it up, and can talk to how much misery it caused doing that website. But MenCap, I wanted to end really with my bit with a quote from MenCap, the current acting CEO, her brother has a learning disability, so she speaks from the heart with this quote, why MenCap support the project. But they say, we saw during COVID that people with a learning disability were often shoved to the end of the queue when it came to healthcare, with horrifying application of blanket, do not apply CPR, for instance, instructions to apply the clinical frailty scale, which is to do with ceilings of care, to people who needed help managing their household finances and people not being prioritised for vaccination, despite death rates being significantly higher than other groups. We are really worried that in the current economic climate with squeezed public finances, we're seeing this worsening. And that's why Rachel's voice is so important and why the partnership is so strong. MenCap can make the moral and human case. We can open doors to policymakers, and we can bring the views of people with lived experience into the room, and they do all the time. But working with Karen and the Phil Fisher team enables us to show them how what is happening is not only wrong, it can be illegal. And we give them the ammunition and the facts. And we're also gathering the evidence to develop research, which is now being worked on as well. So it has impact. And that's what you doing pro bono is all about. It's having impact and changing people's lives, whether you do it for one individual or you try and do it in a broad platform.
Thank you very much, Karen. What struck me there is that the tragedy that Rachel suffered, that you then could help her mother address together with that barrister. You then were able to then create a pro bono project and a charitable initiative that would address the failings much more widely and have a much wider impact than just the one initial person that you helped. Thank you very much. So finally, please, Laura.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for attending this evening. So my name's Laura Hine. I'm an associate at Reed Smith. And I've been working with Maternity Action and their email advice service for the last 2 years. So the Maternity Action Pro Bono Partnership was set up in 2021 as a result of ever-increasing demand from pregnant women and new mothers needing employment law and benefits advice. So Reed Smith is one of the founding partner firms who helped Maternity Action since the project started, alongside a load of other city firms who give up a lot of their time and resources as well, so it's really fantastic. The role we play, we provide draft email advice to clients on anything from, pay and benefits, flexible working, health and safety, discrimination, dismissal, which Maternity Action, who are all qualified employment lawyers, they then review and then send out to their clients. So it's a free and hopefully easy for the users to get some legal advice that otherwise they might not have any access to. So since starting the project, Maternity Action have trained over 300 law firm volunteers across a number of city firms who provide this much needed free advice. At Reed Smith, we've now got 79 volunteers, which is great, all of whom have said, having the opportunity to use their legal skill set to assist those in difficult situations is hugely rewarding. Our project, and I think it's the same across the city, it
it's not just employment lawyers. I'm a transportation lawyer. There's not a lot of boats involved there. So, you know, we mentioned about not staying in your lane. You know, the maternity action advice line is a really, really great opportunity to be able to give back, even if you aren't an employment lawyer. And since the pro bono service was set up, Maternity Action have now given advice to over 2,500 clients who otherwise might not have had any of that access to legal service. The true impact of the service, I think, can only be measured by Maternity Action's clients. What should be the happiest time for a lot of people, you know, being pregnant, going on maternity leave, can end up being hugely stressful. We've got women facing discrimination, being pushed out of their roles, dismissed, demoted, replaced. And having that free advice service means that not only can women get the advice that they're entitled to and exercise those rights, but also have someone to actually support them, challenge the wrongdoing, and having someone on their side and, you know, if it needs to get to that stage, fight for those rights that they have. And the impact of that work is even greater when we look at casework, which is something we've been involved with. We've helped clients file their ET1 forms, which is how you start your employment claim, in order to protect their legal position. We recently helped a single mother who'd been denied her flexible working request. She'd asked for a 1-hour change to her working schedule to do the nursery drop-off and pick-up, which had been unreasonably refused by her employer. Maternity Action helped with her claim and her subsequent appeal, and she ended up with 9 months worth of free legal advice and the confidence to now pursue the matter to the Employment Tribunal with the support of her union, which is really fantastic. So we're waiting for that to go to the tribunal, and, you know, fingers crossed that that goes well. I think the best way, as many of my panellists have said as well, to understand the impact is to hear directly from the people that receive the service. So I have some of the feedback from Maternity Action that they've received that I'd really like to share, because I think it sums it up much better than I ever could. One client writes, "I felt extremely supported by the Maternity Action volunteer assisting me. It was a very different experience than talking to an independent solicitor, who, although was very helpful, was very aware that the amount of time being spent with me could add up to a very expensive bill that would exceed the amount contributed by my employer. I now feel I can move on and enjoy my maternity leave and time with my baby without worrying about immediately needing to find another job." Another had commented as well, "My situation was already very complex and unusual even prior to needing to seek advice from Maternity Action. Having to then navigate additional complexity as I was about to go into labour and then subsequently having that newborn baby, my hormones all over the place as well. It was overwhelming to say the least. The support, knowledge and kindness I received from Maternity Action has been a genuine lifesaver. I could have easily given up, both with the tribunal case and possibly life itself, had it not been for the casework service provided. Maternity Action always responded very quickly to all of my queries and gave me the confidence and knowledge to prepare for and succeed with my tribunal case. I cannot thank them enough." And in one final quote, which I really think sums it all up, one client said, "Maternity Action is a fantastic service that helps women when they need it most and are at their most vulnerable. What they do and the support they can provide is invaluable and can't be underestimated. It changes lives." I really think the role of, you know, small charities like Maternity Action that always have to, you know, fight for funding and fight for space in these areas cannot be underestimated. It is a lifeline to so many people, and even, you know, for people who are struggling to fight against their employer and they think, God, you know, it's the employer versus me, I don't want to cause a fuss. It gets people to exercise the rights they're entitled to have the support that they really need. So, you know, I can't, emphasize enough the importance of doing this work and encourage both, you know, practicing and aspiring lawyers to really get involved in pro bono work in whatever way you can.
Thanks, Laura. It's interesting to go back to that theme of lawyers being able to expand outside their usual practice areas, where this is a really inspiring example of where lawyers from a number of city firms have really impacted, you know, 2,500 clients. So it's a fantastic figure, because each time that's 2,500 families that have been impacted by the pro bono. It's really inspiring. And I think we're going to have a quick discussion now about how we move on from some of the inspiring examples to think about how do we encourage the rest of the profession to get involved in the way that we're hoping tonight will achieve. And so can I, before we get there, encourage you unusually to get your devices out, get your, on the screen if you've got your laptop on, or here in the room, if you can get your phones out and go to slido.com, or you can also enter slido, and you'll see there is a question that we have put on the Slido, which was to ask you to to essentially answer the question, have we inspired you? So during the course of the next 10 minutes, please try and answer that. We'd love to get some, not just a yes from you, but something more as to how we've inspired you. And whilst you do that, maybe we can think about more the background to how you get inspired. Let me ask the panel this. Is it necessary to volunteer to get inspired? Or, you know, did someone tell you, you should do this pro bono work, you know it's going to be impactful? How do you learn that pro bono is going to make a difference to a client, is essentially my question. Let's start with Maya.
I think with some projects it's really obvious from the outset what the result is going to be and how you can impact people, but where you start and where you finish are going to be massively different. And I think the other aspect of the question and how you get inspired, it is handy if you come inspired. So if people pay attention and they find projects, a lot of good examples here, they create niches for themselves. Lots of firms are excellent at giving employees, or chambers are good at giving options of established projects for people to do. But there is also a huge opportunity in paying attention to the world around you, being irritated or upset about something and finding a way to help with that. And I think some of the most powerful examples of pro bono start with irritation or upset and end with something remarkable.
So it could be irritation and upset, but end with remarkable.
Yeah.
There we go. What about you, Katie? Did you get into pro bono because someone told you to do it, or were you inspired to get involved because you heard about a project or you volunteered?
So I first started doing pro bono when I was at law school. So I was at BPP, and they said, you know, if you want to come along on a Saturday, we're going to do a training session for people who'd like to get involved in the free representation unit, and you'll be able to go to the Social Security Tribunal, as it was then, and there's another tribunal, and you can learn how to take these cases. And I thought, that's amazing. Like, would they seriously going to let me do that? Me, kind of incompetent law student. So I went along to the training. I was like, oh, this is amazing. And so, you know, they said, okay, here are the cases. Here's the folder. Pick some. So I started doing these cases, and it was amazing. You went along and you stood up in front of this tribunal, and I won them all as well. It was amazing. And then the tribunal were also really pleased to see law students doing this as well. So, you know, they would do the hearing, and they'd say, oh, stay behind, and they'd sit and they'd have a chat, and they'd say, what are you doing? How did you get involved? And thank you for doing this. It's great to see a student doing it. So that was kind of my first experience of pro bono, and I just found it absolutely amazing that somebody, you know, like me as a student could just turn up and have that kind of impact on people.
So you were surprised, actually?
Yeah, absolutely. I was like, I can't believe that they're going to let me do this.
Our other panellists here, were you surprised about the impact that you had when you first did a pro bono case?
Yeah, I think I was. I think I came into maternity action thinking, you know, we're very fortunate at Reed Smith, I'm sure there's loads of other city firms that do it, but we have scope within our sort of chargeable hours and all of that to be able to do pro bono work, and I think that was a sort of side point, but from private practice, I think it's so important that firms allow you that bandwidth to do that. But it just signed up to maternity action because I thought, fantastic, I can do this, you know, around my billable work. It wasn't until I then took over the role running the partnership with maternity action at Reed Smith and reading the client feedback that I thought, this isn't just, oh, I need to pick the kids up a bit early and my employer's being a bit unreasonable. This is stuff that really impacts people's lives, like day to day. And I think maybe I underestimated the stress that causes people, and like just getting a couple of paragraphs legal advice that makes people feel empowered to go to their employer and say, I'm entitled to this, I think makes such a difference, and, you know, shouldn't be underestimated.
Well, we've been rightly focusing on the impact on the client. What about the lawyer, Anahita? How are you impacted by your pro bono, personally or professionally?
In terms of positive benefits, I think for me, I've always stuck to two, and I always remember them when I'm having difficulty trying to prepare and work on a long-winded pro bono case. One of the benefits is that, as we've said before, it allows you to step into areas of law that you wouldn't have the opportunity to do otherwise. So, for example, for me, I trained in criminal law, and then I started doing some immigration detention work. But as a result of pro bono opportunities, I then started doing international law, inquests, and now my entire career and practice area has gone towards medical inquests. So that's one really huge benefit for a junior barrister, but also the opportunity to network and work with really amazing people, whether they are barristers, whether they're solicitors, paralegals, NGOs, and even beyond the legal industry, getting to know journalists and take a multidisciplinary approach to a case, I think really develops you as a lawyer. So I think professionally those are the benefits. And then of course, personally, I can sleep really well. When I get to sleep, I sleep really, really well.
Please, Karen, help us understand from a law firm's perspective, how do you see the benefits of pro bono, the impact on your team in the firm?
Well, for us, it's really, really important because it develops people's skills. So when we decided, when I got the idea for this project, I had to go and pitch it, and I had to pitch it to an internal and external panel of clients, and to get seed funding for it. And then I had to go and get more funding for it. And that one of the pitches was, it's going to get people enthused, it's going to teach people how to, soft skills, things that you won't learn how to manage a grieving client if you're doing commercial law. But actually you do need to learn how to manage a grieving client, because your commercial client might be quite worried that his business is going down the pan and you've got to save it. You've just got to learn lots of different skills that you'll get from pro bono. Negotiation skills, all those sorts of things. We also get a sense of unity, which I think is really important. Inevitably, and COVID unfortunately made this worse, inevitably within departments we get quite siloed. So as a result of this project, I do much more work with our regulatory team because they're involved in the project. I work with people in other offices, I work with people in completely different teams. And I also do other pro bono work because we have quite an extensive pro bono offering. And I work with people I would never talk to, frankly, who probably wouldn't talk to me. I'm sure we have quite different views about each other. So I think it's fantastic. I think it's enriching. It is really exhausting, though. Yeah. I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't take up an awful lot of my personal time. So this has not been an easy project at times to run, and you have to have commitment.
Thank you very much. Before we ask the final question, can I perhaps suggest we move on to the next Slido question? I hope you've all answered this question, having put the PBW launch into slido.com and answered the first question. And then we're now going to ask you a second question, which is about your biggest takeaway from the evening. So whilst you're thinking about that question, can we conclude, having built on the issues of impact as well as the personal and business benefits, to then finally conclude, Maya and Katie, with this? How do we convince lawyers to do pro bono? Pro bono is importantly voluntary. It's a tradition that the profession in this jurisdiction has had for a long time. It's not for substituting what legal aid lawyers do day in, day out, but we've got to convince more lawyers to do pro bono. Is it the impact that we focus on? Is it the professional or personal benefits? You have the floor and you have 30 seconds.
Well, I'm assuming you want the charitable answer that we give people. I think it is about explaining the impact to everybody, but I also think it's about just realising how good it can make you feel as an individual to achieve something that you would never achieve in your day job. It's as simple as that.
I think, some people, like we said, are scared of coming out of their lane and doing something that they don't feel like they're an expert in. So I think for some people, it's a case of finding a project where they feel like they do have some expertise in it. So it's finding the right project for some people that they can then, they can take it forward and be confident that they've got the right skills for it.
Thank you very much. I think we have enough time for 20-second answers on the same topic if anyone wants to have an attempt. Do you want to have an attempt?
I'll just say on a practical point, it is doable. Just figure out how many hours you can donate, whether it's 3 hours a week, 3 hours a year. Every little genuinely does help.
Yeah. I was going to say, rise to the challenge and enjoy it. It will make you feel so much better.
And I'll just add to what Anna just said about how much time you've got. Maternity Action's a prime example of this. you've got an hour, you can do a draft advice. Like, no matter how much time you've got, there will be a project out there. If you can't commit to, a clinic every Tuesday for 5 hours, that there is something out there you can get involved in that fits you and fits your interests. So just get out there and find it.
And you can job share it. We do some stuff where we job share the projects, which works really, really well.
And on that note, there's a question from the audience, which is, how can I get involved in pro bono work? That is a very general question, and the panels encourage you to get involved. There are lots of ways you can get involved in pro bono. We have a page on the Pro Bono Week website, probonoweek.org.uk. You click on volunteering. We list a number of ways that lawyers can get involved. If you're in a law firm, of course, you speak to your pro bono or CSR coordinator. If you're not a member of LawWorks, that's one way that law firms can get involved in pro bono. There's a large group of law firms through the UK Collaborative Plan that work closely together. If you're a barrister, the Bar's Pro Bono charity is Advocate. You can sign up and do cases through Advocate. If you're in-house, there's a great group called the In-House Pro Bono Group that has lots of advice on how you get involved. You can volunteer at a law centre or an advice bureau. There are many ways, and I've probably missed some. FRU is another example we talked about. 50th anniversary has just been celebrated in the last year. So please do get involved. There's so many ways that we can help people, as tonight has shown. And so I think, unfortunately, we don't have time for audience questions because we want to keep to time. We started 5 minutes late, which means we still have 5 minutes with your patience for me to introduce Lady Rose, who had a stellar career at the bar before she then became a government lawyer and ultimately became a judge, and then in 2012 became a justice of the Supreme Court. So, Lady Rose, thank you very much.
I'm very delighted to have been invited to take part in this event, and what an amazing event it has been. I found it very inspiring, very humbling, and very interesting to hear about all the different ways in which the panel members are helping people in our community who really do need their help. And what has come across is the great variety of work that people can do, the challenges that they face, but also the huge satisfaction professionally and personally that they have clearly got from the work that they do. Like the attorney who spoke at the beginning of the event, I spent much of my career in the government legal service, and one of the things that I learnt there is something that I think is a real clear message that's come out this evening, which is that the skills that you have developed as a lawyer, whether you're just starting out in your career, having studied law, having qualified, however far along in your career you are, the skills that you learn as a lawyer are generic skills. Reading cases, reading legislation, being able to explain things clearly to people, and they're not linked to any particular topic. And it is possible to give advice in areas which are at the moment unfamiliar to you. And I think there's also a great range of areas where pro bono work is important. It's not just criminal law, it's not just housing, claiming benefits. As a tax lawyer, I know that there's a lot of pro bono work for people who end up at the wrong end of a tax assessment and who are very perplexed by that and who really value the pro bono input that there is before the tax tribunal. Let me say something about my experience of pro bono work as on the receiving end of that, not as a client, fortunately, but as a judge. When I was a judge in the Chancery Division, we were always, I know, very grateful for the operation of what's called the CLIPS scheme, which was set up a few years ago, Chancery Litigants in Person scheme. And one of the great excitements as a Chancery judge is when you're the judge in the applications court, where people literally come off the street, they go to the desk at the bottom of the Rolls building and say that they have this problem, and the stock answer that's given by the person in the cubicle is go up to court 10 and a judge will see you and deal with your problem. And we have barristers who are volunteering to help these people who sometimes arrive with a carrier bag full of random documents. And as judges, we were always very grateful for the intervention of the CLIPS barrister to help sort out what they needed and then to come in and present the case to them. And one thing I would say is that you have an effect on the client, and your work is really valuable as a pro bono lawyer, even if actually you can't achieve for them the result that they want. As a judge, I know sometimes, however sorry you feel for the person, there's nothing as a matter of law that you can do. And I think the value of the CLIPS lawyers is not only in the successful cases, but it's enabling the person who has come to court with a problem to understand why they can't be helped, to feel that someone has listened to them, has explained to them what the impediments are in helping in not being able to help them. And that helps achieve, even if they don't get the result they want, it helps them to achieve that they have had a stake in the system, that the system has listened to them, and that helps them sometimes to accept the result, even if the result is a disappointing one as far as getting what they hoped. So I think you're still changing lives as a pro bono person, even if it's only through listening to someone and explaining to them why actually they may not be successful. Now I sit in the Supreme Court, and we still have pro bono representation in a number of cases, not just for the parties who are actually standing up and making submissions, but we often have interventions in the case from charities, from lobby groups, and they often are assisted by pro bono lawyers, and those really do help the court to get a broader perspective on the publicly important issues that arise. And as a judge who is concerned now on the day-to-day basis with the development of the law, I would say this, that I think one of the glories of the law in this country is how the smallest set of facts can give rise to the biggest legal principles. And I do sometimes wonder, with the withdrawal of legal aid, whether the plaintiff in Donoghue and Stevenson, who got sick drinking a second glass of ginger beer with a semi-decomposed snail in it, would that case have got to the House of Lords, to the Supreme Court, under the current system that we have? Would we have had Lord Atkin's wonderful neighbour principle? The law relating to the mens rea for criminal liability for companies. I think it was Mr. Natras who couldn't find a discounted packet of washing up powder when the Tesco's had advertised that there were packets at a reduced price. So these little fact patterns give rise to great legal principles. And I think that the pro bono system and the contribution that it makes, not just to judges, not just to clients, not just to the profession, but to the law itself and to the development of the law, is also something that I think is very worthwhile. So I thank you all for your presentations this evening and for the work that you do, and I hope that the week coming is inspiring and helpful to all those who are currently doing pro bono work and those who I hope will take up pro bono work in the future.
Thank you very much, Lady Rose. As you mentioned, Pro Bono Week takes place the rest of the week. In fact, there are some events in November, so do please check out the calendar at probonoweek.org.uk/events. There are events everywhere across the jurisdiction, both England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. And do pick up the leaflet on your seats about Carols for Pro Bono on the 14th of December. So for us here in the room, I'm sorry we didn't have time for audience questions. Rather, what we instead want to ask you to do is to ask your questions to the panel during the drinks reception. Thanks again to Herbert Smith Freehills for their generosity. I'm afraid those on the Zoom, please go and pour yourself a drink. But if you do have burning questions which you really wanted to get an answer, do please email the info@probonoweek.org.uk address, and we'll try and direct them to one of the speakers. So thank you very much for joining us here tonight and on the Zoom. Can we conclude by thanking our fantastic panel for their presentations tonight?